And so I want to read to you the beginning of Jonah chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. It says this: "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai." Now I want to stop here. We've only gone one verse in, but if you were in the original audience, the original hearer of this, you would be laughing right now. Again, it's written as satire, as sarcasm. And so the name of God here used is Yahweh. It's the God of Israel. And so we know that Jonah is an Israelite. He's worshiping the God of Israel. And Jonah, the name Jonah, means dove, and it's kind of a symbol of peace and innocence. And then Amittai, this family that he's from, it's a word that translates to faithfulness, okay? And so the writer opens this story, which most people have heard. They know exactly what's going to happen. They kind of know what's about to unfold. And the author says, "The word of the Lord came to this guy who's characterized by peace and innocence and is from a family of faithfulness," which is the complete opposite of who Jonah is in this story. And so it would have been amusing. It would have been sarcastic. And so the hearer knew what was coming. Second verse says this: God says, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed to Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying a fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Now, this was an extremely deliberate, maybe you've heard this before, deliberate choice that Jonah makes. It wasn't like he casually went the wrong way. I know sometimes I miss a turn and end up doing a couple loops, right? You're on one-way streets and you kind of get mixed up. This was pretty deliberate. And so, I love maps. Amen? The pyrotechnics were not approved for this Sunday's message, so we'll just have to go with the map. So here's a map of sort of the area we're talking about, and you go to the next one. This is Nineveh right here where the star is, and so Jonah's in Israel. That's Nineveh, and sort of this is the path he initially takes. Instead of going, you can go to the next map. Instead of going to Nineveh, he goes south to Joppa. Okay? Now, let me show you where he was heading, just so we can be clear about this. This is where he was heading, Tarshish. Okay? And so instead of going 550 miles northeast to Nineveh, he went 2,500 miles west to the coast of Spain. Okay, this is where he was heading. So this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't like there was a city close by named Tarmish. They got mixed up, ever in that kind of situation. But to give perspective, this is a long way away. And like I said before, the story of a prophet is a rarity to be focusing on him as a person, as a human. And it gives us this new perspective. And so it would be easy for us to read this story and just criticize Jonah as a prophet who ignores God, right? Who turns his back, who walks away, who wants nothing to do with God. But the thing that we really need to understand is that, and you can put the map back up and I'll show you this, is that God was asking him to go to Nineveh, and Nineveh was actually the center of the Assyrian Empire. Now, the Assyrians ruled the known world at that time, and they were under probably one of the most vicious kings that ever ruled that empire. And so he's sending him to the very center of this, and that king in particular was focused on terrorizing the Israelites. And you can read about these. There's actually 3 different stories in 2 Kings in the Bible of these attacks where the Assyrians attacked the Israelites and do horrific things. They would come in, they would basically take people captive as slaves. They would deport them to different parts of the empire. They would sell them off. And then just to add insult to injury, they would level entire cities. They would knock down every building, every structure, every monument, just to wipe the history of the Israelites off of that place. Okay, it was violent, it was vindictive, it was terrible. And this is where God was sending Jonah. God was sending Jonah to the very people that did this horrific stuff to his nation, his country, his people. And God was sending him there not to destroy them, but to save them. Okay? And so we have to step a little bit out of that perspective and realize that as an Israelite, Jonah would have been a hero for contributing to the destruction of Nineveh. the killing of the Assyrians. He would have been a hero. He would have been celebrated. And so he's under this tension, and like every human being, we kind of do the math in our own head. Maybe you've done that. We're like, ooh, what's the lesser of two evils, right? We're trying to figure out where to go. And so, like most human beings, instead of going to northern Iraq in the middle of his enemies, he goes to the coast of Spain, right? That sounds better. To sit on the beach, right? To enjoy your time away. And so, remember, earlier I said you would laugh at the beginning of this because it was so absurd. So absurd that the book starts by saying, the word of the Lord comes to a guy characterized by peace and innocence, who's from a family of faithfulness, and within 3 verses, Jonah literally makes a choice to destroy Nineveh and ignore God. He's full of anger and violence. He's full of disdain for his fellow people on the planet, and he's ignoring what God has asked him to do. It's absurd, this opening. People would laugh at it because they go, that's exactly what he's not going to do. He's not going to be faithful. He's not going to be innocent. He's not going to be a person of peace. And so it's this choice to go down to Joppa that he makes, this first choice. It starts this chain of events, this spiral of events down in Jonah's life. It says he went down to Joppa, where he found a ship and bound for that port. And after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed to Tarshish to flee from the Lord. And even the word aboard, it translates to go down into. So he goes down to Joppa. He goes down into the boat. And then it says, verse 4, then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. So again, it's written as satire. It's written as if the ship is actually making the threat. That the ship is saying, hey, it's getting pretty bad, and if you all don't do something, I'm just going to break apart. We're all going to die. Right? The ship is going to make the choice. The ship is threatening to break up, and all the sailors were afraid, and they cried out to his or her own God. And they threw the cargo into the sea to try and lighten the ship. And the irony in the story is that the sailors who worship other gods, not the God of Israel, are looking up to God. They're throwing things overboard. They're trying to lighten and lift the ship out of the water. But Jonah, the prophet of God, is going in the opposite direction once again. It said, not only did he get aboard the ship, when a storm came, Jonah had gone below deck, where he laid down, and he fell into a deep sleep. And this is Jonah in a spiral. His life is falling apart. It's this imagery. He goes down to Joppa. He goes down aboard the ship. He goes in the wrong direction. He goes below deck when the storm comes. When everyone is facing the chaos, he lays down. And then he goes into a deep sleep. And this imagery is this downward spiral in his life. And we talk about it this way in the Old Testament and the world today. We just don't always realize it. But when we talk about things not going well, when things aren't as they should be, we're down on our luck, right? We get knocked down. We hit rock bottom if things are really bad. If things aren't going well, we say, hey, they're not looking up, right? You're not on top of your game. And for Jonah, things were getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And maybe you know this feeling. Maybe you've experienced this spiral. Maybe relationships have spiraled in your life at some point. Maybe your finances, your career, your businesses, your outlook on life has gone downhill. And no matter where you've felt this in life, you know there always seems to be this pattern, this progression in the wrong direction. You feel like it's out of control. It's going the wrong way. You don't know what to do. And for Jonah, God told him to go up to Nineveh, and he defies God. Instead of doing what he ought to do, he went down to Joppa. And then he tries to do his own thing. He tries in his own strength. He picks a direction that is complete opposite of what God's asked him to do, and he boards a ship. And then when the consequences of that action begin to appear, he hides below deck because he's ashamed. Now, no one knows why there's a massive storm. People are in chaos on the deck above. But Jonah hides his role in their turmoil. Maybe you've been in a situation like that. When things are going crazy and you start to realize, hey, someone's doing something and I don't know what it is, and they won't own up to it. And you're kind of living in this chaos and turmoil and you don't know what's going on. And that's the scenario that's unfolding in the ship. And Jonah, he hides below deck. And then he lays down. Not because he's tired, but because he's taking cover. He's trying to survive the consequences. Have you ever had that experience where there's not a whole lot you can do, and you just sort of hunker down? You try and survive, like, ooh, maybe I can make it through this. Maybe I can weather this storm. Maybe if I just wait a little bit longer, things will get better. And so he lays down and he goes into a deep sleep, and it's a metaphor for denial. And so he's denying what's really going on around him. And the series of events, the choices he makes, the situations that happen in this story, it's a pattern of behavior that leads Jonah and any one of us, when this happens, on the spiral, we're in desperate need of a turnaround. And so this story is powerful because it shows us you don't need to be a prophet to relate to this pattern. We're looking at the life of a prophet. But he's making the same mistakes that you and I make all the time. It's this human condition across all creation that plagues relationships. It plagues marriages, organizations, teams, careers. It plagues our mental and emotional health. We get in this spiral, and you've seen this before. Maybe you've seen this in someone around you, maybe someone you love, a child, a spouse, a coworker, a boss. Maybe you've seen it in your own life, and you know, no matter how it approaches, no matter what it looks like in your own life, it feels like this downward spiral. And that's where Jonah is right now. Instead of doing what we ought to do, like Jonah, we do what we want to do. We try under our own strength. Maybe you've done that. I come from sort of a culture and an idea that you just sort of suck it up and do it, right? That you just will it into existence. You just try harder. And he tries under his own strength, and it doesn't work. And when it doesn't go well, we try and hide and cover it up. We try and sort of cast blame in other places. We just try and survive the fallout, the consequences of what we've done. And then we get to a point we don't know how to get out. We don't know how to get out of this problem, so we end up in denial, and we try and convince ourselves it's someone else's problem, right? It's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's the situation. It's not me, it's a series of unfortunate events, and I just happen to be the one suffering the most, right? We convince ourselves that there isn't really a problem with us. It has something to do with other things, other people. And that's when we get to the point where something has to change, and we need to wake up. We need a wake-up call. We need something to shake us, to break these patterns and these cycles. And this happens in the life of Jonah very quickly. Just as quickly as his life deteriorates, as it spirals, he gets a wake-up call. And it comes from the captain of the ship. The captain comes down and says to him, "How can you sleep?" He's basically saying, open your eyes, Jonah. Do you not know what's happening around you? Everyone else is going crazy trying to fix the problem, try and solve things, and you're down here sleeping. How can you close your eyes to what's going on? Maybe you've had that conversation with people, like, have you seen what's going on? Wake up. Look around. And so the captain says, get up and call out to your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish. See, they don't even know it's Jonah's fault at this point, but he's behaving in a way that doesn't really make sense. I know in an emergency, it's great to be calm, right? It's not great to be asleep, right? And so it's not fitting. So he's saying, get up, do something. And it's ironic that the prophet of God, the one that speaks for God, is the only one who's not calling out to his God. You have sailors who are worshiping other gods, and they're screaming and crying. They're looking up for someone or something to speak to them and save them, and Jonah is silent. And so the sailors said to each other, again, they're problem solving. They're trying to figure it out. They said, come, let us cast lots, which is like sort of a version of drawing straws, to find out who is responsible for this calamity. They're trying to see if fate or destiny or pure luck will save them, will show them whose fault it is. And so they cast lots, and guess what? It falls on Jonah. And so they ask him, tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What's your country? What people are you? And maybe you've been in this situation, maybe on a team or in a family where things are not going well, and you know something's going on, and you just have a lot of questions. And they said, we don't know who this person is. He's not acting as he should, and so we're asking these questions. What is going on? And we have a lot of questions when things aren't going well, and it's because we want someone or something to actually own up to it, right? I know for myself, one of my big things in life is accountability. And so one of the things I have to avoid is making sure everybody is accountable for every little thing, because I wouldn't sleep at night, right? And also, I'm not good at judging who should be accountable for what. Amen? But we want people to be accountable. We want people to own up. We want people to take their responsibility seriously. And so Jonah is realizing he's actually caught. He's caught here, and he answers this. He says, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord of worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and dry land. And this terrified them as they asked, what have you done? For they knew he was running away from the Lord. Now, this is powerful because the crew has no idea what's going on. Jonah just says, hey, I'm running away from not just a God, the God over all things, over land and sea, who created all things. And they're going, why have you done this? Why have you turned away from the God and then thought it was a good idea to get on a boat? The God of land and sea. And why did you think it was a good idea to get on our boat? Why couldn't you get your own boat, right? And so they're terrified. They're wondering what to do. And so they said, what have you done? And then the sea gets rougher and rougher and rougher, and so they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down? They said, we don't know anything about this God. Obviously, you do. What should we do? And he says this. He says, pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will all become calm. I know that it is my fault and that this great storm has come upon you. And we can look at this and think that Jonah is being really heroic, right? That he's the hero of the story, that he's going to sacrifice himself to save other people, but that's not what's going on at all. In fact, he's looking for a way out. Jonah's still living out the same pattern. He's looking to escape. He's overwhelmed by what's going on. He doesn't want to face what's happening. He's been caught. And so he says, just throw me overboard and that will fix everything. He says it's too much to take responsibility for. Jonah finds himself in an overwhelming place and he says, I just don't think things are going to turn around. And maybe I shouldn't go on. And that's a different picture than the hero that we sometimes make of people that sacrifice themselves, right? And there may be some of us that feel the full weight of this, that our mess is too big, that there's no way that things will ever turn around, whatever that may be. And we're holding that burden alone, just like Jonah. And I'll tell you, a few weeks ago, I had a friend in that exact same place. He couldn't see a way out, and he chose to carry it alone. He chose to carry it alone, and he chose to exit, and he's no longer with us. The burden was too great. He didn't think he could get out of his mess. He didn't think things would turn around. And if you hear nothing else today, I want you to hear this, that we belong to a God who is good. We sang about the goodness of God. And he's inviting you and me the same as he's inviting Jonah into a turnaround. Now, I pray none of us have to be swallowed by a giant fish for that to happen. But even if that were to happen, we know the story ends where there's a turnaround.